Parenting is a humbling experience. Every child is going to do something that makes you look like you're maybe don't have everything put together. And then you multiply that times 8, and it just compounds the number of times that you look like you don't really know what you're doing.
For the record, my dear friend Jessica Galbraith does know what she's doing. And by the way, she said times 8 because, yes, she has 8 kids. I know, it's a lot. Feel free to let that soak in a minute. I'm Elizabeth Pearson Garr, and on this episode of the Experience Podcast, I get to talk with one of my favorite people about a topic that has consumed my life for the past almost 15 years, motherhood. Hi, Jessica.
Hi.
My dear friend Jessica, who has many, many extraordinary qualities. One of them is that she's the mother of 8 children. So, Jessica, I was thinking, we've known each other for about 10 and a half years now.
I know. When you asked me about this interview, I was starting to think about my very early memories with our little kids in the twos program at preschool.
What's your first memory of meeting us?
I don't think it's the first memory because I think I did meet you at the school and we had a little chit chat. But I think one of my earlier memories of you was a conversation we had at Costco. And my memory is you said, "Oh, are you stocking up?" And I said, "No."
You said, "This is my weekly shop."
And then I said, "Oh, how are you doing?" And you said, "Well, I was just offered this big job and I'm trying to decide whether to take it. And I have these 2 kids, 4 and 2 years old. And, it just seems like such a great opportunity, but I really want to be a mom and I want to be with my kids. And I feel like this would tear me one way or the other. And I'm just trying to decide." So that conversation, I think it probably went on for over an hour in Costco in the frozen food section. And so
I remember it so well. And
Yeah.
I remember telling you the phrase that kept coming to my mind was, "It's not time. It's not time." I just wasn't ready.
Well, yeah. And there is pressure. And I know that you were feeling some pressure to go and do something great with your career. And when it comes knocking, it's hard to turn that down and look at your children and say, "This is my priority." But that's what you did. And you're one of those people that finds joy and happiness in parenting and motherhood and finds fulfillment there. And so, that was your choice.
Well, you're definitely someone who finds joy and fulfillment in parenthood. I feel like you've always been one of my role models. Okay, so I want to go back to meeting you because I remember it so distinctly. So my kids were 2 and 4, and you had a 2 and a 4-year-old, and then you were pregnant. And so I asked you, "Oh, is this your third?" And you said, "No, it's actually my 5th." And I was blown away because even the thought of having a 3rd child at that time felt overwhelming.
So that was my 6th.
Oh, so that was your 6th. Yes. Okay. And I just thought, this woman is like a superwoman. And then 2 weeks later, you had him. And then you were back at school like 2 weeks after that with him on your back, volunteering at nursery school. And I was incredulous because I thought after I had my babies, I was so sleep deprived. I felt like the world had to stop because I just couldn't even keep going on. And you just had this way about you of just popping right back up. So I just feel like I was always in awe of how you just kept going.
Aww.
So you ended up having then 2 more with such joy. You would tell me like, "I'm expecting."
Yeah, it's always designed. I tell people that all the time. They say 8 kids. And I say, "Yep, all planned and no twins and all with the same man."
And no adoptions.
No adoptions.
So tell people what the age range is.
So Jacqueline is 19 and Olivia, the youngest, is 6. Well, actually, she just had her birthday on Sunday, so she's 7.
So it's 8 kids in 12 years. That's very, very tight schedule.
Never a dull moment.
But this was your hope. You're the oldest of, is it 6 kids?
6. Yep, 6 kids.
And that was kind of your dream growing up? You thought, "I want to have a big family"?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I just remember going into the attic with my siblings. There was this old desk up there and we would put on plays. And of course, I was the oldest. And so I was always in charge, which I loved. And we would organize sports games and we would put on musical things. We would sing to the radio. And in my house growing up is kind of like my house right now, where just all the neighborhood kids were at our house. And so I loved the social aspect of it. I loved being in charge of creating really amazing, fun times. My mom would let me throw a lot of the birthday parties or like participate a lot. She did the majority of the work clearly, but she would let me decorate the cake as I got a little bit older or come up with ideas. Just all of that fun that kind of just is associated with kids was just so exciting to me. And I loved it.
And some of it, I think, is your personality. You're very extroverted, so you love being around people.
I do.
So I think that that's part of it, is you loved having people around when you were a kid, and you still love that.
Yeah, absolutely. There are very few moments where there's not somebody in my, like, this is a rare moment that I'm sitting in a room by myself. But I can't think of one time where I just felt like, oh my gosh, I just need to be by myself.
You don't crave that at all?
Nope.
And I think that that's pretty rare. You know, I love kids and I love being a mom. And there's a part of me that feels like I would have loved to have a lot of kids, but I don't know that I would physically be capable of it because of, well, the sleep deprivation when they were young. But then also, I do need alone time. I do need time to recoup. And also, I need a lot more sleep than you do. I think that's it too.
You know, I never needed a lot of sleep growing up. I wasn't a teenager that slept in past 8:30 on a Saturday morning because I felt like it was a waste of the chance to be with everybody else. I just felt like there was too much to do to sleep. I remember feeling that way on my mission. I remember feeling that way in graduate school and, just studying all the time and just not needing a lot of sleep and kind of feeling like it was one of my superpowers because I just could get stuff done that other people couldn't get done because I had more time.
Yeah, I think it is a superpower.
But then I started having babies and it kicked it up a notch where, there were so many years where, I swear I was sleep deprived for more than a decade. And I would be sitting in the dentist chair and fall asleep, or I'd be sitting in my hairstylist and I'd fall asleep, or it was just that much more of that sleep deprivation.
Go to the dentist to get a nap.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And I said, don't take this around. He's like, oh, I'm so sorry that, that we're running behind or whatever. And I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, I'm lying in a chair with like relaxing with nobody telling me that I need to get up and go get them something or whatever. Like, this is great.
Well, I remember when you had Olivia, didn't you say, like, can I stay in the hospital an extra couple days? Because it was more relaxing in the hospital than at home.
I never felt like in the hospital after having a baby, they would let me sleep, because they were always coming in and checking my vitals or whatever. And so with the first 6 kids, I was in the hospital for less than 24 hours from start to finish. I would just go in, have the baby and leave. And they would say, oh, well, your insurance will pay for an extra day or whatever. And I'd just be like, why would I want to stay here? I want to go back home. I want to be with my family. But then when I had Olivia, I remember looking around and just thinking like, this is pretty nice. Like
it's like a spa.
I think they gave me like 48 hours or something. And I took the full 48 hours and I just felt like,
funny.
Kind of nice to just sit around and have people bring me my meal and
delicious hospital food.
Yeah, right. Oh, no.
Can you talk us through just some of the day-to-day stuff? How practically do you do things like breakfasts, lunches, laundry, making beds, cleaning the house, all these things that most people find a struggle just with their 2 or 3 kids?
I try to streamline as many things as I can because I noticed if things were too hard for me to do, then it would put me in a bad mood because I wouldn't be able to do the things that I wanted to do. I want to sit down on the floor with my kids and I want to help them with their homework and help them with their piano. And I want to plan fun activities and I want to do the fun stuff of parenting.
Yeah.
And so all that other stuff is, essential, clearly, but that's not why I became a mom. I just need to get it done. And so if that stuff turns into a real hardship for me, I get grumpy and I see my kids going and doing things without me and it makes me sad. I would rather be with them. So I've streamlined things as much as I can. So I've got the 2 dishwashers here in the house and a dishwashing drawer on the deck so that if we eat on the deck, I can just put all the dishes in the dishwashing drawer on the deck and then just put them away 2 steps away instead of having to each meal bring them into the kitchen, wash them, and then bring them back out.
Functionality.
Yeah. Yeah. And then I've got 2 washers and dryers, the big, huge front loading ones in my laundry room. But then I've got one in the ADU in the back. I've got a dishwasher out there. I've got, another kitchen out there, so that there isn't a lot of tedious work that I have to do on a regular basis. Those things actually make a huge difference for me and for my mental well-being. And then my big thing just recently is that big Hobart mixer, where I can just...
We love Miss Hobart.
Yeah, Miss Hobart. So I like to bake. And just having the Hobart where I can just dump in enough ingredients for 10 loaves of bread and set the timer to knead for 10 minutes while I go and pick up a kid from dance or drop off a kid at karate or run upstairs and, throw another load of laundry in. That's huge. So just the little things that make life easier.
Even this is so incredible. You make homemade bread, which is, by the way, the most delicious bread you've ever eaten. And most people who don't even have kids or have a few kids don't make homemade bread. And you have 8 kids and you make homemade bread. It's phenomenal.
Aww.
What you do. So I feel like you really go above and beyond. And also another thing about you is when we go to your house and you have so many kids around and they all have friends around. And when your kids were little, you might have been like breastfeeding a baby and someone has a play date and someone needs, I don't know, the code to the iPad or something. Like there's stuff happening and you're so present. You have a way about you of dealing with chaos. I mean, you could call it chaos or just busyness or something. And yet you can be very focused as a friend and as a mom.
Thank you. Well, I think that that's also kind of a personality trait. I function best with a little bit of buzz around, and I like having a lot of different things going on just regularly. And I don't know that that's a normal personality trait.
You like having a lot of balls in the air?
I do.
You like juggling a lot of things?
Yeah, I do.
So yeah, I don't think a lot of people would be a successful parent of multiple kids in the way that you are, because I think you're built for it.
Yeah, that may be.
I don't know.
It may be. So I've got like a mixture of personality traits that all kind of come together to make it something that I enjoy. And you might be right. Like other people may not enjoy that. They might want more quiet. And interestingly, a lot of my kids have friends who are only children. And they come over here and they think it's the best thing ever. And then my kids go over there and they think it's the best thing ever. They'll go over and see like everything just completely organized or completely quiet and love it.
Just the contrast.
Yeah.
So back to some of the practical stuff. So in the morning, you have all these kids come down, and do you make breakfast for all of them? Are they responsible for making some eggs or some cereal or something? And then do they get their own lunches? Do you lay out a whole bunch of stuff?
Yeah. Yep, exactly. So I'll come down and I'll make one breakfast. And then everybody comes in at different times because everybody's got different schedules in the morning. And they'll look at what I've made, and sometimes they'll want it and sometimes they won't. And they might go and make a parfait, or they might go and get some cereal or whatever. And then I just have one bin in the fridge and one bin in the pantry that just have lunch items in them. And I just pull them out and put them on the counter, and then they go and get their lunch boxes and just kind of pick through what they want to put in their lunches. However, this came back to bite me last week, actually. I got a text from one of my friends, and she said, oh, I was volunteering during recess, and Tia pulled out a gallon-sized bag of veggie sticks and sat there happily eating veggie sticks.
Oh, how funny.
So apparently she'd gone into the pantry and just like gotten her own thing and put it in her backpack. She made that choice. I talked to her about it afterwards, and I just said, that's probably not the best lunch choice. So it doesn't always work like clockwork is what I'm saying.
But that's okay.
Yeah, and it's okay. They survive.
You sometimes tell some funny stories about the kids without shoes.
Oh yeah. Because, I was just coming and going constantly. And of course, they just take them off every time they came in the house. And so like finding a 2-year-old's shoes is kind of a big deal a lot of the time. And so, oftentimes I'd scoop them up and put them in the car seat, and off we'd go to drop off and pick up and go to school for something. And we'd get out of the car and they wouldn't have shoes on. And, we're in California, and I just felt like, it's okay.
And then there's all the other kids. Like my kids would leave their stuff at your house. And then I would be calling you like, are Lucy's shoes there? Or she left her backpack or something. And you probably have all your kids' stuff and all their friends' stuff to sort through.
Because also, like most people, if they have one child or two children and they've had a play date that day, they know whose thing it is. Like they see a jacket that doesn't look like theirs and they know, oh, okay, I'll just text Elizabeth and let her know that there's a water bottle here or a jacket. For me, I find it sometimes on the second day after we've had 6 kids running through our house,
right.
Over the 2 days. And I look at it and I just send a group text. I take a picture of it, send it to all 6 parents.
It's been like a field trip at your house every day.
It's the lost and found.
So what about bigger things like traveling? I know after you grew out of the minivan, you had to buy a bigger car.
Yeah.
You couldn't even all fit in one car.
I know. Yeah. So we got a Mercedes Sprinter. It's got 11 seats. That's how we travel now.
So pretty much the rule is if it's less than 16 hours, we drive. And they don't fight because they each have their own seat. Yes.
And then what about when you need to stay at a hotel or something? Do you need to get like 3 rooms, or how do you, traveling is expensive when you have a big family.
Yeah, we've been big Airbnb, VRBO users because we can get a bunch of rooms and oftentimes a lot cheaper than the hotels. And then we have a kitchen and all that stuff. But, like when we go to Europe, you have to have 3 rooms for our family and 3 Ubers or taxis, depending on what country you're in.
Oh, gosh.
Europe is built for 1 or 2 kids.
Did you get a lot of looks? Like, wait, what is happening here? Where's this family? The kids keep coming.
Oh my gosh. So we were in Taiwan. I lined up all of the kids from tallest to shortest in front of Taipei 101. And I thought, oh, this would make such a cute Christmas card picture. And so I backed up to take the picture. And before I could take the picture, they were swarmed by a few different tour groups. And like they were picking up Tia at 2 years old, and they were taking pictures with my kids. Like it probably took, 15, 20 minutes. And I kept looking at my brother-in-law who lives in Taiwan to see like, this is safe, right? Like they're not going to just take off. They kept saying like 8 from me. They were just like floored. I feel like in Asia, people thought it was wonderful. People didn't want to do it themselves. Like, a lot of the 30 to 40-year-old women either didn't want to have children or they wanted to have one. But when they saw our family, they thought it was great. They thought almost like a throwback to 50 years ago in China when they had these big, huge families. And so I feel like it was really positive attention in Asia.
What about here? Obviously in our community, people just know you guys, but initially even it's kind of like a thing of curiosity, how do they do it? And if you meet someone, what do you think the assumptions people are making about you, or how do people treat you?
So it depends on how put together we are. Like there was one time we were flying back from Hawaii and we'd had a rough end to our trip. And, I hadn't really looked at what the kids were wearing. They kind of put on their own clothes from their suitcases. On the way home, one of my itty bitty kids started throwing up everywhere, like threw up all down the front of me, threw up all over herself. So I was cleaning up vomit, like the smell was around us. And my husband and I were a little preoccupied with some of the other things that were going on. And so we weren't disciplining the children as much and keeping everybody in line as much as we normally would. And people got a little bit mean, just
passengers.
Yeah. Some of the passengers like, oh, this family's out of control. Or if, however, all my kids are dressed well and, we're happily laughing and talking and going through the airport, their hair's done and their clothes are on cute and everybody's joking and helping each other and whatever. And people stop and, what a wonderful sight and how great and what a beautiful family. And oh my goodness, you're so blessed and you're such an amazing mom. And So yeah, that's my answer. I think it depends on the situation. And unfortunately, when you have 8 children, the probability of, back when we had 8 children under the age of 13 or 12, there was always somebody who was doing something they probably
Acting
shouldn't.
up or getting sick or something.
Eight
Yeah.
times the probability of another parent of having somebody not do something at any one time. And I think for every parent, parenting is a humbling experience. Every child is going to do something that makes you look like you're maybe don't have everything put together. And then you multiply that times 8, and it just compounds the number of times that you look like you don't really know what you're doing. So I think the complication is, one, I have 8 times the probability of somebody being loud in church, or crying, or disobeying in some way, or climbing something they shouldn't climb, or whatever. And so it looks like maybe I'm not as good a parent as somebody else who doesn't have 8 children, even though per kid they're acting out the same amount.
But also, I think people they see the logistics of our vacations. When we had 6 kids, we would go to Disneyland, and we had a double baby jogger for 2 of the kids with a baby bumper. Do you remember this? With one of those
Yes.
bumpers that the kid could stand on behind.
Yep.
Ben would push that, and then I had a stroller with a kid in it, and a baby bumper with a kid standing on it, and then an ergo baby carrier with a kid on my back. And we would just cruise through Disneyland. The kids wouldn't get lost. We could make great time. We could get from ride to ride really quickly, watch the fireworks show, and then get everybody back to the hotel quickly without losing anybody. And
Speaking of getting lost at Disneyland, do you remember when we went together and we actually lost Lucy? So here you had all these kids, and we actually lost, what was she? I think she was 4. I'm texted you, Jessica, we lost Lucy. And you said, look in what's the treehouse one?
yeah, we all.
You're like, I've lost a lot of kids up there. She's probably up there. But actually she wasn't. Someone found her, and she was in the lost kids. They have a whole lost kids area.
My goodness.
Some worker had walked her over there. But it was just so funny. Your first reaction was like, she's probably up in that treehouse. I've lost a lot of kids up there.
Yeah, and you just have to take it down a notch too, because there are moments where I've been sincerely worried about a lost kid. I've had panic because I'm in New York or something and I haven't seen my child for 5 minutes. But you do just have to learn how to kind of take a deep breath, especially if you're at the elementary school and your kid doesn't show up for 10 minutes, the probability that they're okay is pretty high. And so you just have to have a little bit of patience. But yeah, I remember that moment too, where I'm just okay, here are the 3 places I would check.
Before panicking, and then we can start panicking. So how do you deal with just each kid having such different needs? I have 2 kids who are just very different personalities from each other and do different activities and have different emotional needs and all of that. I'm always just amazed at how you can meet your kids where they are and handle all of their needs. How do you do that in a day or over a week or whatever it takes?
Yeah. So, I do have a goal to have a check-in at least, especially with my teenagers now, at least once a day, where the 2 of us have a conversation, whether it's on the way to dance class or if it's right before they go to bed or whatever. I really make a goal to every day have some sort of one-on-one time where I'm not distracted by other things, where I can kind of get into what's going on in their lives or just talk about whatever. I remember Abigail one year, I don't know if she was in 3rd grade or 4th grade. And, I'd planned this huge birthday party for her and ordered the bouncy house and had, all the invitations out. And, when I started planning the birthday party, she kind of said, okay, yeah, I'll have and then shortly afterwards, she started saying I really don't want a birthday party. And then she'd get more and more vocal about not wanting to have a birthday party. And I thought, I'll just kind of problem solve and see what's going on. What is the reason? And as it turns out, she just didn't want to have that many people all paying attention to her. Foreign concept to me. And, Ben's a little bit more introverted and he heard us talking and he looked at me and he said, why are you making her have a birthday party when she clearly doesn't want a birthday party? And I canceled the birthday party. And so as a mother, that's been something that I've definitely had to learn. Like, just because I would love to have all of my friends over and have a big party doesn't necessarily mean that all my kids,
Want that every year.
I don't need to be by myself. But some of my kids do want to be by themselves, and it doesn't mean they're sad and I need to go in and cheer them up. There are some of those learning moments throughout parenting that I just kind of had to figure out because they're not all like me, and kind of recognizing that and allowing them to have that personality without trying to make them be like me.
One time you said something to me that was just so profound about parenting. You're not just trying to make sure that they're fed and educated. You have this 18-year arc of raising moral, emotionally intelligent, secure people. It's not just about sort of getting them out of the house. I just love that you are so intentional about your parenting and that you really take this role so seriously and playfully. You're very thoughtful about it.
No, thank you. And I feel like if I just looked at my life, and so this is a perfect example. I was at a wedding and I was sitting next to a woman who had decided not to have children. And she was trying to build me up with my choice of being a stay-at-home mom. And she said, if you added up all the hours of cleaning that you do, and all the driving that you do, and all the laundry, and all the cooking, and you added all those hours up at the going rate for how much it takes to hire someone to do that, you actually make a lot of money. And I turned to her and I said, oh, that's not how I see my job at all. I am not a housekeeper or an Uber driver or a cook. I am a product manager, and my product is my children. And I have a deliverable in 18 years. And within that 18 years, I have a tremendous amount that has to be developed in each of these products. And that's what I'm doing. And along the way, like when I'm driving Alexis this morning, she and I had a 20-minute conversation. And during that conversation, we talked about what's going on with Ukraine, what's going on with Russia. We talked about education. So there's not only a relationship development, but there's also a values lesson there where we're sharing values. And she's 18 now, so she's sharing back with me, and we're kind of developing her critical thinking skills. So somebody might look at that and say, oh, well, that would have been a $70 Uber ride. And so you made $70. And I just think, oh my gosh, no, like driving is the excuse for me to be able to raise my child and to develop this. And not that children are products, in the sense that we just like put them on a
Right.
line and then we ship them off at 18. But my job was talking to her and developing those moral standards and education, critical thinking skills. It was not driving the car.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you look at it more as a project manager, then it's not just, the $25 an hour of cooking or cleaning that you're adding up. And, clearly, if that were the way that I saw my job, I would not be a happy mother.
Do you get offended ever when people make these comments? You and I have had these conversations over time about stay at home versus working outside of the home mothers. Do you think people make presumptions about you that you aren't paid for your work or that you chose to have a lot of kids? Do you think that they think that you're not educated? I mean, you have an MBA, like you could be getting paid a lot for working outside the home. This is your choice to do what you're doing. You own it. Do you ever feel like you have to be kind of defensive about it?
People will on occasion say things like, well, how could you possibly give all 8 of your children enough love and attention? And I just feel like it's so hypocritical because, you've got Sheryl Sandberg writing books about lean in and saying like, oh, your kids will actually be better if you lean into your careers and they don't need all that one-on-one attention and whatever. And I just feel like, well, then why is that different from, me having 8 children? If you're saying like your career takes priority over being a stay-at-home mom, and you don't have to, not even like
have a career and balance parenting. Lean in to a career and your family life or your children will work itself out. But then to look at somebody who has 8 children and say, well, that's too many children, and you couldn't possibly give them everything that they need is so hypocritical in my view. Because you can't have it both ways. You can't say like, oh, they don't need all that love and attention, lean into your career. Well, but you've had too many children and they need more love and attention.
I wish that judgment would just go away. There's no reason that a person needs to pass any judgment on how many kids somebody else has. I haven't walked in your shoes. I don't know how many kids someone is capable of having. I have nothing but admiration for how you handle your life. I don't think I could look at anybody and say, oh, you only have one child, you have no children, you have 10 children. That's wrong. I don't know who they are, what they're capable of.
You know, when I had 8 children under the age of 13, like you see me walking around and it looks like things are completely out of control. You know, we've got,
I don't know about that.
With 8 small children, things are definitely chaotic. And so, especially during those early years when I was in the middle of it and I had so many kids that I was working to develop, I feel like every single person on the planet gave me parenting advice.
Unasked for, of course.
Unasked for parenting advice. One of Ben's bosses, he had one child.
Oh, and goodness.
We went on for probably 2 hours with him giving me parenting advice because, you know, he's in a position of power in his realm, in his career. People always ask him for advice. And so he just carried that forward to like, well, of course, I'm so amazing at what I do. I can educate this person on how to parent. And single people would give me parenting advice. And people at church would give me parenting advice because, you know, when I'm sitting in church and I have 8 kids under the age of 13, we make more noise than the average family. And there are more things going on in our pew than in other people's pews just because there's a multiple of 8, you know, and they're all small. And so it just seemed like everybody needed to give me advice about parenting for a long time. And now that the kids are older, that's completely stopped. And now it's almost the reverse where people are just like, oh, you seem to know what you're doing. Can I ask you something? Like not everybody, but I feel like the roles have reversed between when I looked like, you know, we were quite the spectacle. And now when I have these older kids that are well behaved and, you know, good kids or whatever, people are just like, oh, you know, maybe I should ask her for advice.
Now, do you feel different or do you feel like just the externals are different? Do you feel like you've really grown or just the appearance has changed?
Well, I think I've grown, but also if I were to go back and have 8 children under the age of 13, I mean, okay, yes, I know that I should have a diaper bag that has change of clothes for each of the kids and everything lined up and perfect. And I understand the concept of having prepared for everything and brought an extra snack for each kid. And I get it. But there are time constraints on my life. And either I can do this one activity for one kid and do it with all the paraphernalia that's associated with that in the perfect way, or each of my kids could do an activity and I'll throw a water bottle at them as they're heading off to soccer. And there's not like a snack and everything else along with it. And you know what? They still go to soccer practice. They still learn soccer. They still have some water and they come home happy. And so a lot of my parenting at that stage was a little bit of triage. Like, okay, what are the essentials that I have to have so that each one of these kids can have the life that I want them to have? And what can I cut out? And so people would look at the things that I'd cut out and think, oh, she doesn't know. Not that it was a decision. Like, okay, like I can either spend 20 minutes looking for my 2-year-old's shoes, or I can just buckle her in her car seat and carry her and go do what I need to do. And some people would look at that and say, oh my gosh, she can't even get shoes on her kids' feet. Or the reality is, I know that kids are supposed to have shoes on their feet. But in this case, I've decided that 70 degrees outside, it's not
such a high priority that I'm going to say that this kid can't do an activity because I have to spend, just some of the stuff that looked like I didn't know what I was doing. I did know. I just had made a decision not to do it.
You couldn't do it all. You had made the decision to have a lot of kids. And so once you had all the kids, you had to make sub decisions within that to accommodate all of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And for me, fun's always going to win. If it's putting my kid on a soccer team or having them have their uniform ironed, or whatever, I'm always going to choose the soccer team, or I'm always going to choose the dance class, or I'm going to choose because I want them to have fun, because then I can live vicariously through their fun.
Do you feel like that's one of your driving principles? Do you kind of come back to that? Do you think about that a lot? I want to have fun.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, I love that. Do you think about what it'll be 10 years down the road or something when all the kids are out of the house?
Yeah, I'm just assuming that I'm just going to have them around all the time. I mean, not that they'd be like living in my house anymore, but I just fully expect to have very strong relationships with my kids and my grandkids and continue to have fun.
Well, that's what you're creating also by the conversations in the cars and the daily check-ins and all of that. You're not just raising them with intention, but you're also creating strong relationships with them.
Yeah, and I actually added it up one time. So we have 45 relationships in our immediate family.
Oh, all of the kind of web of
Like,
relationships.
I'm trying to, I don't like completely manage all of those relationships, those 45 relationships, but it is in the back of my head. I want each one of those 45 relationships to be strong and powerful and positive and, real strength for the future and for now. I want them to call each other on the phone and ask for advice, or I want them to say, hey, let's go get a boba tea or whatever. Like, I want those relationships to all be very strong.
But they can't be all the time, right? I mean, they are siblings. So there has to be sibling conflict and, right? Please tell me that they're
Yeah.
not always getting along.
Yeah,
Because I only have two and they're not always getting along.
of course they are. Like somebody keeps the door open when they get up in the morning and wakes up the other kid. Yeah, of course. There's that stuff. But, like, I think when the rubber hits the road,
They'll be there for each other.
yeah, I'm hoping. And they do.
They're a team. You're a big team together.
Yeah, I hope. I mean, I hope that it's, kind of us against the world, or, whatever comes our way, that we're, a strong unit. That's my hope.
Do you ever feel like you just need a break? Well, oh, actually, what I did want to mention to people is another thing that I think is brilliant that you and Ben have instituted is your date nights. To have that as a weekly thing, Friday nights, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because with so many kids, you probably don't naturally have maybe time in the week to connect. So you guys make that a real priority.
Yep. Even if we were connecting, it was like, okay, you're going to pick up this kid and I'm going to
Logistics.
Yeah. Like, I would see him come through the door and I was not thinking, oh, there's the love of my life. I was thinking there's backup, like, oh, thank goodness he's here, like, okay, you do the bath, I'll do the dishes, you do yeah. So we started, and the thing that saved me is I had Margarita come every Friday night, and she was like clockwork at 6:00 every Friday night for a decade. She was there. So it was almost more work for me to cancel than to go on my date night. And most of the time I tried to like do my hair, put on my makeup, put on a nice dress, or, get dressed up in some way so that it felt like a date. Having that time on a Friday to just, kind of look in each other's eyes and kind of remember why you fell in love and all the beautiful things that are in that person across the table from you or sitting next to you, or just having that is so important and so fun. And I mean, there were some days where it was like, Wednesday morning, and I was thinking, okay, just 2 more days and I get to my date night, just because when you have 8 kids,
it's like a little escape. Yeah.
And just something that's scheduled once a week that's joyful. I mean, motherhood is hard. not just
Yeah.
physically, like, you were talking about sleep deprivation and carrying pregnancies, and it's physically so demanding and mentally it's so demanding. And there are days I remember thinking, okay, I'm going to take a shower and having a plan to take a shower right after I got up, and like seeing Ben pull into the driveway at 6 o'clock. And I literally haven't had a break in the day to get into the shower. There are those days where you're
Yeah.
just working flat out. And, like the idea of self-care is going to the dentist chair, like whatever. It's hard.
Yeah. I remember when they were really little and just being so physically exhausted, and someone saying, yeah, right now with like toddlers and babies, preschoolers, it's physically exhausting. But when they get older, adolescents, teenagers, it's emotionally exhausting. And I remember thinking, well, boy, I can't wait for that,
Yeah.
because I can handle emotional things, but this physical thing, like I just can't take it. But now I'm at that stage. And I think the emotional stuff is really, really hard. I mean, I am getting sleep that I wasn't getting, but it's equally as difficult. All the stages, you sort of feel unprepared for. But like you say, that doesn't mean it's not worth doing. There's also, that comes with that is like huge amounts of joy. I mean, there are times that I just think, how in the world did I get blessed with this person? This thing that she just said, or this hug that I just got, or this look that I just was given. It's like unbelievable. Or just to be in her presence. Like, she's just this phenomenal person, and she's here. She's my kid. And then you turn around and the other kid gives you some other look or some comment, and you think like, oh my gosh, this is so hard. It's a roller coaster, but it's fascinating. It's worth being on.
Yeah. And just like you were saying, it just fills your heart so much, and your heart does end up multiplying. Your heart just is so, not only is it full, but it's actually grown. I look at, I'm going to get choked up a little bit. I look at, these kids and everything they've become, and the work that they put in, and all the glorious thing that they represent, and all the beauty that they are. And you just have to be taken aback, and the blessing that you get to be in a family with these people. And especially as they turn into adults, and as you see their potential and what they are becoming, the opportunity to be able to escort that for however long. I mean, I'm still escorting that with, my oldest, and I suppose like motherhood never ends. The opportunity to be so intimately involved in all of those moments, there is no other experience ever that will equal that. It's so joyful. It's just so joyful, and it's hard, but it's so joyful, and my heart is so full.
Every stage has its challenges and has its bonuses, I think.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And when you have 8 kids, you get to experience those all at once. Like I have the teenage sass and the teenage really interesting conversations. And at the same time, I have the mom, you're the best thing that ever happened, like, bear hugs that you can't get out of, and you have to like play Candyland.
All
yeah,
in
right.
one day.
I've got both, which is a huge blessing.
Thanks for doing this, Jessica. It's always great to talk to you. We could go on and on and on.
Fun conversation. I know. When we do get going, we do end up talking for a long time, and it's always such a joy.
Could be a really super long podcast, but we do have to end it at some point.
Yeah. A 15-hour stream.
Who wants to keep listening all weekend long? I adore you as a person, and I admire you as a mother.
Oh, thank you. And I feel the same way about you too. I feel like you look for and find the people who are inspiring to you. And it's been a joy to parent with you for the last 10, 12 years.
Yeah, likewise. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll see you soon.
Okay, sounds good.
Here are some of my takeaways from our conversation that I think may apply to all of us, even those of us who don't have 8 children. Number 1, not needing much sleep is a superpower. one that a tiny baby can sap from you. If you need to go to the dentist for a nap, no one is judging. 2. Prioritize your own mental well-being. Streamline menial household activities as much as possible to maintain your sanity. 3. Know yourself. Certain personalities may be better suited to having kids or having multiple kids or not having kids at all. No need to judge anyone else's choices. 4. If you see some kids with messy hair or unmatched clothes or bare feet, don't assume the parent doesn't know what they're doing. The parent is parenting how the parent wants or needs to parent at that particular moment. 5. Our kids not only might, but likely do have different personalities than we do. Accept that. Embrace it. They're not mini versions of us. 6. When the day arrives that your partner walks in the door and your first thought is, "Oh good, back up. It's time to plan a date night." And finally, number 7. Parenting is hard. That doesn't mean it's not worth doing. A huge bear hug of thanks to the wise and wonderful Jessica Galbraith. I'm so grateful she's my friend and that we're doing this parenting thing together. Please visit our website, theexperiencepodcast.net, to listen to all of our past episodes, find out how to follow us on social media, and sign up for our newsletter. And if you're enjoying this podcast, please rate and review it and subscribe, and also tell a friend. I'm Elizabeth Pearson Garr. Thanks for joining The Experience.